Unlaced podcast. It's actually not bad. It's really good, bro. Well done.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of the Unlaced podcast. As promised, we did take a few weeks off. I did say we would get back to weekly episodes. We're back on deck and we're firing, and I'm pretty stoked today because we do have a superstar guest. Growing up, I actually always admired him on the field, and so much so that I was quite scared and reluctant to ask him to come onto the podcast as I saw him bouncing around the studio that we shoot the podcast out of in Campbell Brown. And for those that know Campbell, a Hawthorn legend, premiership player, a very fierce man on and off the field. But tell you what, geez, it's great to have you in, mate. And yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
As I was saying before, it's quite interesting thinking, you know, with your footy background, you'd be around here at SEN, you know, covering some footy and so forth. But I realise you've got a love for SEN track and horses. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I've always loved horse racing. I love the animal. I've got a property 45 minutes outside of Melbourne, and we've got horses on the property. And as a young kid, I remember the old man always used to have the races on, and we'd pick a horse as a youngster. And then when I got to Hawthorn, Shane Crawford and a few of the guys there owned horses, and I was pretty keen to get involved, you know, with horse ownership. So we bought a couple of horses and had a little bit of success. So I love that aspect of it. I love to have a bet, and I just love the social side of racing. You can go there with your friends and just have a really good time. So ticks a lot of boxes that I like. And,
that's good.
when Hutchie started SEN Track, which is a little bit different, you know, for anyone that's ever listened to us, where we don't have the rights to the races. So we sort of call them ourselves and play music when we win, and we try and make it as colourful, as fun as we possibly can. So, yeah, it's been fantastic considering that racing's gone all the way through during lockdown and the COVID stuff. It's been the one constant, the one sport that pretty much hasn't missed a day.
You're completely right, actually. I didn't even realise that. I was thinking last year, I'm like, geez, the races are on every day, all the time. Just interesting on this, because I assume, given your background, you've probably had some success on a couple of a couple of hares. There we go. Lucky it's a podcast, folks. On a couple of like mares and so forth. But how do you know, like, when someone calls and you goes, mate, I've got one that I think you should get into? Like, I assume you get a lot of phone calls like that.
You do. You know? It's a bit of potluck. You've got some guys that, you know, really big into it, so that they spend a lot of money to get the best horses from overseas and buy really, really good, well-bred fillies and colts at sales, and they naturally offer them. Right? You might get offered 15, 20 horses a year where you just take a percent of. Right. You can take 0.5% up to however much you want.
Right.
And then it's just a guessing game, and you know, if I've knocked back some seriously good horses, you know, that have gone on to win 7 and 8 Group 1s, Boban and Sunlight and a few, and you're like, you kick yourself. Yeah. I've gone into a couple of horses that are just absolute duds.
Yeah. Okay.
Show no ability at all, and you have a bit of luck in between, and so there's no perfect science, and it is quite an expensive hobby, but
of course,
it's something you love, and you work out who sort of has the luck, and you go with them, you follow them.
The magic dust.
Exactly.
Did you always want to be a footy player growing up?
I did, yeah. For as young as I can remember, if someone asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, I always used to say I want to play AFL footy. And primary school, you know, grew up in a football family. My old man obviously played. You know, a bit of a legend over in West Australian football. He came across to Richmond for a year, the year that they won the premiership in '74, and missed it through suspension. He got rubbed out in the semi-final, believe it or not, for throwing the ball too hard back to the umpire.
Jeez,
he threw it back that hard and got rubbed out for a couple of weeks, which he missed the prelim and then the grand final, which they went on to win. But loved footy. Like, I was obsessed with footy. Barracked for West Coast when I lived in Perth. Yeah. We moved to Melbourne in 1993 when I was 10. Okay. And my father got a job at Richmond, trying to sort of help them come out of the Save Our Skins campaign when they nearly went broke and they were doing the tin rattling and everything. Yeah. He came over to sort of help them financially from a commercial perspective, and started barracking for Richmond. Then we'd go to watch the Tigers play every second week, and just It's all I wanted to do as a kid, just play
that's
AFL footy.
amazing.
But I was always pretty small. And as I was growing up playing sort of under 12s to 15s, I was a late maturer.
Okay.
So, those blokes that have
Yeah.
hair, a bit of stubble and hair under their arms, and at 15 they're
men.
massive.
Driving the game. Yeah.
I was the opposite. I was skinny and a bit scrawny and a late maturer. So when you're sort of 13, 14, 15, 16, that's when you start to get really serious about your footy.
Yeah.
And my footy had plateaued a bit. I probably showed really good signs under 10s to 13s
Yeah.
when you're playing against kids.
Yeah.
But because I was a late maturer and there were other players that were bigger than me and I was trying to be a midfielder, it was tough work. So I never thought that I was an absolute chance to get drafted. That was the aim, but I had to work really hard for it, yeah.
Right, that's crazy. Because how tall are you now?
I'm 177 centimetres, so 5'10".
Was that ever like back in the generation when you got drafted, which we'll go into, the unbelievable draft class that it is? Like, was that ever sort of put against you as your height? Because I'm a similar height, but and I just always felt that I'd be too small. But then, like, I look at you and we're the same height, and I think of, like, actually people used to shit themselves against you on the footy field. So I'm like, does height really matter? Or, like, do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, like, it sort of does. Like, I got cut from the under-16 Vic Metro side. So they picked a squad of 50 and they cut it to 40, and I made that cut, and they cut it to 30, and I made that cut. And I remember the last night of training before they finalised the squad, there was 28 of us, and they were taking 25. That was the... And doing some lane work, and the coach, David Dixon, sort of calls one guy, and you can tell that he's explaining the bad news to him.
Oh, no.
Comes back and joins in, and there's another. And I'm thinking, he's just cut two. There's literally one person to go, right? And sure enough, he sort of gestures for me to come over and cuts me from the squad. And you're pretty shattered, under 16, Vic Metro, you're getting towards your draft year, and you're desperate to achieve your childhood dreams. So getting cut's quite a big deal. And he explained to me that he thought I was too small. That was the first thing. But he thought I was too slow, right? Driving home that night, bit disappointed. And the old man basically just said, look, if the coach has said you're too small and too slow, you can't do anything about being too small because that's just genetics. But you can do something about being too slow. So if you really want it bad enough, let's get you a speed coach, and you can work on your speed. So at least then, you're turning a negative into a positive. And
correct.
I'll jump ahead 2 years, right, because this is a true story. And I sometimes tell this story to kids when I go to talk at their footy club, because under 18, this is the top age now, and David Dixon, who was the Vic Metro under 16 coach, he's now taking the under 18s, right?
The curse.
Yeah. So I had a bit of history and a relationship with him, but and he was a great guy, and he didn't pick me for the under 16. So I knew I was borderline again for the under 18s. There were some really talented players that you'll go through their draft in that year. Again, I made the squad of 50. I was having an okay year at Oakley Chargers. Made the squad of 40. We played some practice matches. Made the squad of 30. It gets down to Optus Oval, 27, right?
To get picks. So
27 are there, and there's 25 to get picked again. This is like deja vu, and I've made it to the last night again. And David Dixon cuts one person, a devastation, and then he calls me over, and I'm dead set walking to him.
Oh, no.
2 years later, thinking, I know what he's going to say. This is the same news he's going to give me like he did at Victoria Park 2 years earlier. He's going to cut me. I'm so close, but I'm so far away. And he came up to me and said, Campbell, I just want to let you know that you're in the squad. Not because we think you're better than him, or him, but 6 months ago, I went down to Glenferrie Oval to watch Hawthorn train. He said I was in the social club having a beer with a friend, and I saw this kid rock up in his school uniform, get changed, and go out into the middle of Glenferrie Oval and started doing some running, hopping and bounding and skipping and running exercises. I turned to my friend. I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Campbell Brown. He comes down here every single Tuesday, has for the last 18 months, runs with Bowden Babicek, the speed and strength and conditioning coach at Hawthorn, because he got cut from a squad a couple of years ago and the coach said he was too slow." didn't know that he was saying it to the actual guy that said it.
Kidding.
And David Dixon left that day and went, there's a kid that took the feedback I gave him, went and worked on it for 18 months and came back. And, I was a bit quicker, right? I was a bit quicker. You learn to run, better posture and things like that. But he picked me in the Vic Metro squad purely because he saw that I was desperate enough to go away and work on it, and I had a really good carnival. I played on Ashley Sampi, who was a young Indigenous freak from Western Australia, and I kept him goalless when we beat West Australia. Then I played on a guy called Burgoyne, who relation to Peter and Sean Burgoyne.
So definitely talented.
And I kept him goalless against South Australia. And then I played on Gary Ablett Jr. in the final at the MCG and towed him up, right?
You're kidding.
And on the back of that, I went from maybe getting drafted, like I was a guy that was on the cusp, to definitely we're going to pick up this guy. I didn't know which club.
Wow.
But just goes to show. And I try and tell kids that like the harder you work, the luckier you get, right?
100%.
And it's the work, but it's also the perception that they see you doing the work and they know what type of person you are and how dedicated you are and how hungry you are. And that gets you the foot in the door sometimes.
Mate, that is that's one of the most Pete, I reckon that's one of the most inspiring stories we've ever heard on this podcast. I mean, I've spoken about this before to Jamie McLaren, who plays for Melbourne City in the A-League when he came on, because he got cut from, I think it was the state team and the AIS team. And like, you say it now, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but at that time we were talking about like, that was life or death. And I assume the same thing for you. So to have that response, because he had a similar response as well, it was like, well, I'm not going to take no for an answer next year. I'll get back in. And it's really hard to think that way that young, like, because it is like the biggest heartbreak you can have.
Yeah.
But come. Yeah. Okay, cool. On which one? On that whole story? No, oh my God.
What? He cut it.
No, they're. All right. What we'll do, Pete, is we might just go through the remainder, and then we'll come back to that if we feel it. Yeah, just to keep.
Did he not record that?
No, the recording's flashing in and out. He's got it steady now, but through the story, he said it was flashing.
Oh, really?
But we kind of do need that, and I don't want to make him repeat it, so that's fine. In future, Pete, if you see that flashing, just let us know straight away, please. Sorry about that, mate.
That's all good.
I don't know if you can be delivered as good as that as well. Like, it was. All righty. All right, Pete, tell me when we're ready to go. 3, 2, 1. Now, we spoke, I know that story camp was pretty inspirational, and I assume having had a good carnival once you were picked in the squad after all that sort of work and lead up you'd done to be an AFL footy player, did you know you were going to get drafted? Did you feel pretty confident after the tournament?
I was more confident than before I was going into it. There still weren't a heap of clubs that were overly interested in me. I had 4 clubs, I think, come and interview me and show some expression of interest. One was the West Coast Eagles, and I didn't really get a feel that they were ever truly wanting to pick me up. One was Richmond.
Yeah.
I think that was just because of the connection with the old man. I was sort of ticking the box there, but weren't overly keen. The Lions were really keen.
Wow.
And Hawthorn. And the recruiter at the time was a guy called John Turnbull, JT.
For Hawthorn?
For Hawthorn.
Yep.
And Hawthorn had just made the preliminary final and they'd lost to Essendon by under a goal in 2001. And I think they were just trying to add a little bit of grunt to their list, right? Because they were, Hawthorn at the time were a skillful side, but they weren't seen to be overly aggressive or tough. Right. They had the number 1 draft pick that they'd traded Trent Crowe away to Fremantle for and had the number 1 pick, and a lot of the fans were not happy because Trent Crowe was one of the favourite sons. And Hawthorn had picked 110 16, 32, 36, and
There was like 5 or 6 in that one draft, wasn't there?
it was, yeah. So they got Hodgie at 1, right? Talk about adding some grunt,
Jesus.
that was genius. But came with a bit of pressure as well because there was a toss-up on Luke Ball, Chris Judd,
Yeah.
or Luke Hodge. Who do we
passed
pick?
up,
Who do we
right.
pick? And they went with Hodge because of the leadership, the hardness and everything. And in the first couple of years, Juddy won a Brownlow, played in a premiership, and people were questioning the decision. Early days, can you believe that? They,
Unbelievable.
they got a guy called Daniel Elstone, who was a tough inside mid that never went on to play any games. Rick Ladson,
Yes.
who was a premiership player, picked me up at 32 and got Sam Mitchell at 36, right? So you could argue that 2001 draft really helped set the club up to the success we had, many years later. But John Turnbull lost his job as the recruiter for Hawthorn at the end of 2004 because one of the reasons was because he picked up Luke Hodge and not Chris Judd.
Wait, but so just before, because I'll go back into this draft class, and when I do want to go to the draft class of 04, did he get sacked before Roughhead and Franklin came in, or was that his sort of last? So it was before.
No, he was gone.
Okay.
He got moved on with the new coach, Peter Schwab left, and with him the assistants and John Turnbull and everyone. That's not the only reason, but one of the big reasons was that Hawthorn had failed in a couple of years post that draft. Luke Hodge was playing AFL footy, but he wasn't sort of the star that Luke Ball and Chris Judd was, and people are sort of saying, they made the wrong decision, which is always find extraordinary that you can try and marry up two players' career before they've finished.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Look at it in its entirety at the end.
The twilight, right?
And you're certainly not begrudging Hawthorn's decision to pick Luke Hodge at number 1 after 4 premierships, 3 as captain.
You'd prefer that, wouldn't you? He's the CV that he had versus Judd. And you're right, Judd's first few years was like just out of this world. But just to go through this draft class, because it's just Hall of Famers everywhere. And I remember, because I was a St Kilda fan, we were in this similar position where we picked up Luke Ball, and Luke Ball's a superstar coming into the AFL scene. But everyone's like, well, we could have got Chris Judd, or we could have got Sam Mitchell, or Gary Ablett, or James Kelly was even in that draft as well.
Yep.
But like, is it still looked back on now? Is it like one of the greatest draft classes ever? And did you know what some of these lads could achieve, like when you were in that sort of pool of
you
players?
don't know.
No idea?
No, I mean, we're just 17, 18-year-old kids at that time. And,
Right.
you talk about how deep's the draft. And they're like, it's deep up to the top 20 or top, But a lot of those players, Dane Swan went like in the 50s and Brian Lake went in the 70s.
Yeah, that's right.
David
Brian
Hale.
Lake.
And this went all the way out to the very end. We had stars all over the place. Stevie Johnson, Jimmy Bartell, James Kelly, Gary Ablett.
Right.
That was Geelong's draft.
Yeah,
so they did unbelievably well.
It's ridiculous.
And so, it's definitely a draft you look back on and you go, wow, like have a look at the players that they got and the bargains that you could have found at pick 50, 60, 70 and 80.
Yeah.
And a lot of clubs had success on the back of it, and Hawthorn was one of them.
The irony, because you and Geelong were the players, the quality of players you picked up, and then, fast forward 6, 7, 8, 9 years, the absolute classics that you guys would have against them. And I remember, I can't remember who said it, one of the footy pundits was just saying, it might have been an ex-Geelong or Hawthorn player, but like the amount of Hall of Famers on one field at one time when those two were running at each other, like we'll look back on and realise, holy shit, what an epic battle that was. Coming into Hawthorn early days for you, and obviously this is 2001, this is pre-Alistair Clarkson, this is pre the Hawthorn we know today of just the last 10 years that have been so dominant, or 15 years. What was it like for you as a young kid?
It was fantastic because I lived just up the road, right? So Glenfrey Oval, we were still training at. It'd take 2 minutes to get to. I was still living with my family. So in terms of, moving to Brisbane, if I'd have got drafted to Brisbane, I would have had to have moved interstate, tried to break into a side that had won. They were just about to go. Yeah, they just won 2001. They're about to win 2002, 3 and play off in a granny in 04, right? So I'm thinking, like, I'll never get into that side.
Yeah.
So to go to Hawthorn, that we're on the cusp of success, but living up the road. You're just a starry-eyed kid. You get there and all of a sudden you're training with Shane Crawford and these guys. It was just great. But you don't think too much of it. You sort of just want to get there and improve and be the best sort of player you can be. I was a million miles off playing AFL footy. I started my career in the Box Hill 2s.
Yep.
So not even Box Hill.
1s, 2s.
Yep, the 2s, right? In the development league. 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I'd get there. I was the only listed player on the ground. So all the other Box Hill players were playing Box Hill 1s. So I was coming from a long way back.
Did that hit you mentally at all? Or you
that
just
was
took
really,
it on
it was a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
But again, it's just another hurdle you overcome. And you're like, well, right, if I play good footy in the Box Hill 2s, I might get a look at the Box Hill 1s. And I played one game in the Box Hill 2s, got elevated to the Box Hill seniors, played 2 games, belted David Teague.
You joking?
And got rubbed out for 2 weeks, right?
Wow.
So coach wasn't happy. You want to get as much game and development into you as you possibly can. They discussed bringing me back through Box Hill 2s again, right? and they didn't. They brought me back through Box Hill 1s. I played 2 more games.
Yeah.
The seniors had a terrible loss.
Right.
And Swabby, the coach, decided he wanted to make a bit of a statement on some of the senior guys. Yeah. And he picked me and a couple of other young guys to go to Adelaide and play Adelaide at Footy Park, Adelaide Oval. Yeah. Footy Park it was, yeah. To debut. So all of a sudden, like
is this in your first year?
Yeah, again, how quickly,
wow.
2002.
So
my first season.
First season.
How quickly it can turn. You're playing Box Hill 2s and thinking you're a million miles off, which you are. So all of a sudden, I debuted round 11, and I just remember saying to myself, I got this opportunity before I deserved it. Some players play really good footy for 2 years in the 2s and they can't break it in. I was like, now I've got the spot.
Don't lose it.
I'm not losing it to anyone, right? I'm just going to do absolutely everything I possibly can. I never want to be out of the side again. And I never got dropped my whole career. I missed games with suspension. I missed games with injury.
Yeah.
But I never, ever played another game in the 2s ever again.
Wow.
So
that mentality's so unbelievable to me, though, because then you get that full 360. I still think there's a lot of blokes that would be in the Box Hill 2s and think, fuck this, like, I'm way better than this.
Yeah, but that's an ego thing. You got to park
that's
your
pretty
ego
good that
away.
you can have that at a young age, because usually some kids do, but I think that's stance.
Yeah, I think that you need to have self-confidence in your ability.
Yeah.
Which is different to ego.
100%.
If you're the best player in the sport and you've done things, you can have an ego, right? When you're an 18-year-old kid that has done nothing,
you've got no choice.
You can have the self-confidence and belief in you, but you don't have the right to have an ego.
Yeah.
And you don't have a right to be shitty that you're playing back pocket when you think you should be playing midfield or you're starting on the bench, right?
Yeah.
Park it and prove with your actions. Right? And they're the best players that I remember playing with were those guys. Sam Mitchell didn't get drafted in his top age year. Yeah. He sent a video of himself to 16 clubs, right? Or every club out there saying, this is my highlights package. I'd love to come down and train with you guys. And he said of the 16 clubs, 12 never got back to him. Right, 3 said thanks but no thanks, and 1 club invited him down to train at Box Hill before Christmas with no expectations or guarantees. And he did that, made Box Hill side, had a reasonably good year, got drafted, went on to be 4-time premiership player, Brownlow medalist, and captain the club, right? Brad Sewell was off the rookie list, started his career as a back pocket, wanted to play midfield. Then he got in there as a tagger, right? It takes time, so you just got to let your actions do the speaking and not have an ego, not crack the shits when things go wrong, because you can turn them around really quickly. And my motto always was anyone can play well in a winning side. Ball's free-flowing and everything's good. Make sure you're the best player for your team when you're in a losing side. When you're down by 10 goals and there's 18 minutes gone in the last quarter and people are thinking, we'll get through this game, we're going to lose anyway. That's when you go your hardest. You smother, you tackle, you chase, you go back with the flight, because that shows to the coaches, your teammates, but the supporters, he's still having a crack. And I'll never drop a bloke after a bad loss that has had a crack. They'll drop the players that drop their hair and try and play footy on their terms.
Yeah.
But they'll never drop the bloke that keeps having a dip.
Jeez, bloody well said. Well said. Is the 01 draft for Hawthorn. I mean, Roughhead, Franklin, Lewis, like just, again, 3 Hall of Famers that are just going to be talked about for a long time. One question on those 3. When they came in, did you have a feeling that those guys were going to be as good as they were?
Yeah, you did. You knew very early on that they were all going to be really good players. To what level? You wouldn't say, oh, Franklin will end up kicking 1,000 goals because it's unbelievable what he's been able to achieve. But they all came in with they were athletically pretty gifted. They were confident. They slotted straight into our side relatively early, like most of them played from day one. And we were very much in the development phase. We just had to get games into these young kids.
Right.
Build a really strong structure and game plan around what we had, because Clarko came in and was pretty hell-bent on playing a certain style, a method.
Yeah.
And it was probably quite a futuristic game plan
Right.
that we weren't capable of executing, right?
Yeah.
But we knew that if we could, it'd hold us in pretty good stead, defensively and everything to be a better side, because we're coming off 5 wins and second last on the ladder sort of stuff, and a bit of a clean out.
Yeah.
We got a new training facility in Waverley, which was pretty important because Glenferrie was pretty decimated and
small, wasn't it?
Small. There's a train line there. You couldn't do proper full ground drills, and
it's quite historic when you look at that ground, though.
Yeah, it is.
You know the history there.
Yeah, really good. But sort of modern footy moved ahead, and Hawthorn was stuck. So getting Waverley, which was state of the art back in 2005, probably a bit old now even, but and Clarko coming in with this game plan and wanted absolute discipline. The amount of times that we'd had to get up at 5 or 6 in the morning, drive down to Kerford Road in St Kilda and jump off the pier as a group because a player had missed a massage, a physio appointment, was late to a meeting, right? He came in and he wanted to set an example, but not just to the player. It's easy to just say, right, you missed the massage, you're going down. He wanted buy-in from the group.
Wow.
So you let everyone down by missing a massage, so all of us are going down and jumping in the water. And
that's awful.
That's the last thing we want to do on our day off at 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it happened repeatedly until players started to take a little bit more responsibility.
Wow.
And they stopped missing massages. They were punctual. They were on time. They weren't leaving their tape in the showers for someone else to pick up. Just all those little things we got much better at. And it's amazing, once we got better at that and understood the expectations that we needed, we got better on the footy field. And he would go through every game, microscopically going through. If you did the wrong thing structurally, you got exposed on a Monday in the game review. It wasn't about missing targets, dropping marks, right? It was about not doing the right thing by the team. And that's how just slowly, bit by bit, player by player, we've become a better side.
Wow. It's one thing I was keen on hearing about Clarko, because Clarko came in, what was it, 2004?
Yes, yep.
So for that, I mean, you kind of spoke on some of like the immediate kind of cultural changes and stuff, which I do want to go into like the Hawthorn culture a little bit. But when he came in, were like some of the things you said there, I assume were obvious immediate changes. Were there other real sort of things where you're going, okay, shit, this place is gonna change a little bit under his guidance? Yeah,
relatively quickly. I mean, the first thing he did as senior coach of Hawthorn was book us on a plane, and we all flew over to Papua New Guinea, and we walked the Kokoda track. That was one of the first things he did. Started December 2004. Here we all are, 7-day hike. We've got the SAS soldiers that are taking us, and we're also looking at leadership because Shane Crawford had stood down as captain, so we didn't have a captain. So that went...
Was this 04? Was this
04.
His first year?
Yep. So it was a bit of seeing who are going to be the leaders who are going to drive us to success, and that was great. I remember the first night we were at a place called Isharava, which was a famous battle site, and we got up late at night and we walked there in the dark, and the SAS soldier tells us some history, some stories about what happened here at Isharava, which was where the site where the Australians fought the Japanese and were outnumbered, and they forced them back, and there's a lot of casualties taken. And on the Isharava, there's 4 pillars, and one word on each of the 4 pillars: courage, mateship, endurance, and sacrifice, right? And when we did the hike and we came back to Australia, and we're having a talk about what we got out of Kokoda, apart from the great significance historically with the diggers fighting the Japanese and holding them at bay for so long, not allowing them to get through to Port Moresby and then attack Australia, was unbelievable. We just kept coming back to Isharava, and that one night when Clarko said, "What do you blokes want to stand for as a footy club? What words do you want to be known for as players?" We went, courage, mateship, endurance, and sacrifice. If we can take those words that were on the battlefield at Isharava and we can play with courage, mateship, endurance, and sacrifice, and you can rate our performance based on those 4 pillars and what they look like, then we've got a tangible goal that we can all strive towards. And that's pretty important sequence of events for Hawthorn.
Yeah, they would have been like some real culture building and team bonding experiences as well. Combining that with some war-torn stories. I have seen some sort of footage of you guys doing the Kokoda Trail as well, and it looks
brilliant.
like an absolute grueling.
Do it if you can.
Yeah.
Get some mates, and once the world opens back up, I'd do it. It's just magnificent to do. So
when with a couple of those things there, when you're setting those examples of the team you want to be and the culture you want to build, was that a thing that Clarko said he wanted to change, or he naturally just came in and built it? And on top of that, how critical was that to you guys getting success so quickly?
Oh, that was really critical. Obviously, we knew we had a talented list. Did we think we could win a premiership? Who knows? But when Clarko came in, he started to set the boundaries and the game plan and the disciplines around it. We were improving. The biggest thing I think Clarko had or gave us was real belief. He's a guy that you want to play for. And we truly believe that his game plan and structure and the words he was saying to us were going to drive us to success. Right? If we bought in and believed, and what he did was he really simplified footy for a lot of players. You've got your superstars, right, that are just gifted.
Yeah.
Buddy, Hodgie, Mitch. They know what they're capable of. They go out there and they do it, right? And they kick goals, take marks, make important plays. They'll play well more often than not, no matter what, no matter who's coaching, no matter what. But to be a successful side, you need to have 22 players on the day all really contributing. And I think Clarko gave players 15 to 22. The 6 or 7 guys that aren't the best.
15%.
But he gave them belief that if they played their role, we would win the games, right? And even me to an extent, I was an average footballer till Clarko got there. And he just said, mate, these are your strengths, killing the high ball, your aggression in the air, this, that, and that. Play to them. Decision-making, disposals. We don't want you kicking the ball. It's not what you're there for, right?
Yeah.
So you get the footy, handball it to Guerra, Birchall, Burgoyne, someone, because they are a better kick than you. I'm not being rude, but they're better, right? You're better at winning a hard ball than some of these guys. So you win the hard ball. And he gave everyone this role, right, that just played within your limitations. And guys like Michael Osborne, it's not about kicking goals. We want you tackling, chasing, spoiling, bringing the ball to ground, locking the ball inside the forward 50. And if at the end of the day you come off the field and you haven't kicked one, but you've laid 4 or 5 tackles, you'll play next week. We'll reward you with vision, of the good things you've done. So all of a sudden, you had all these players that were hell-bent on just playing their role, right?
Oh, yeah.
And your stars did their thing. Buddy kicked his goals and, Ruffy kicked his goals. But I reckon sides that win finals and premierships are built on your 12 to 22 player that are at a really good level that can do their things. And that's, yes, we were littered with superstars, but it's funny, in some of the biggest games we played, those finals, the 08 grand final, it wasn't our superstars that played well.
It was
Mitch didn't have a great game. Buddy was kept pretty well held by Scarlett, or it was Michael Osborne, Chance Bateman, Rick Ladd, Xavier Ellis, Clinton Young, guys that, you know, not big household names, big stars. They were the ones that dominated in those big games, those big moments.
So that comes back to like the yearly management of how Clarko was with some of these guys, that when they got there in September, they didn't have that sort of fear factor in their mind of like they're not good enough.
No, well, they just knew they had to go out there and execute their role.
Wow.
And that's all you needed to do. You didn't get worried about super coach points, disposals.
Yeah.
All you needed to do was execute your role. If we had more players doing that on the day than the opposition, we knew we would win.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a bit of selflessness that if you don't have that ego, if you don't go out there and think, oh, I've got to be the guy that kicks 4 today for us to win, right? Then it doesn't matter. We knew that if Buddy wasn't kicking goals, Mark Williams would bob up. Cyril Rioli would bob up.
Yeah.
In the midfield, if Mitch wasn't getting the clearances, that's okay. Brad Sewell could. A young Lewis back then. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he says it a million times, but lose a soldier, replace him with another one is a saying that while it's bad that you're not in the side with injury, suspension, or you get dropped, we're replacing with the guy that's going to play the exact same way as you. And that was the mentality.
Mate, it's unreal. Coming into 2008, did you guys have a feeling like you were a sniff to win it?
Not at the start of the year. We had a good year in 07. We'd made the finals for the first time, but we're still young and learning. The one thing we had in our favour was we were starting to master Clarko's cluster, that full ground press that he brought in, which was revolutionary. No side knew how to get through it. You know, they tried handball and they couldn't. They tried chipping with kicks. They left players inside the forward 50 to spookers. So, but we were getting better and better and better through training and games and vision and everything of this full ground press. And Geelong were by far the best side in the comp. They won 07. They dropped one game in 08. But we always felt like we had the cattle and the game plan to cause them trouble. Could we beat them as a young side? Oh, we need a few things to go right. But we didn't fear them. And we lost to them late in the year, I think about round 17 or 18. We played them at the G on a Friday night. We probably should have won. We made a few errors and turned the ball over at a crucial stage, and they won by 9 points or something, right? But we left that game going, no, we can definitely get them if we play them again in the finals. And that happened to be the grand final, and we all know what happened there. They didn't kick straight.
Mate.
We took our opportunities in the third quarter, and we stole a grand final that statistically we probably shouldn't have, because they won clearances inside 50, shots on goal. They won every category, right, that you need to win a game, let alone a grand final. But they kicked like shit, and we kicked a few out of our arse. And we got that grand final that it was before our time. It was Clarko's first. It was my only grand final because I wasn't at Hawthorn for the three-peat. But it set a tone.
What is that fucking like winning a premiership? We talk about the moment of when the under-16s Victorian coach said, mate, you're too small and too slow, and then fast forward to 2008, you've just literally won a grand final. I mean, is that everything that you could ever ask for? Yeah,
it is. I'm not very emotional type of person. I'm pretty pragmatic, and but when the siren sounded, I'll openly admit, it brought a tear to my eye just because you think back to when you're 10 years of age and all you want to do is play AFL footy. You had to work so hard to just get on the list, go through injuries. I'd had some injuries over the journey that you got to work through. That's just a natural part of playing footy. But then you've achieved everything that you've wanted to, right? And so it was really emotional. Shane Crawford's last game, he achieved the exact same thing. But 17 years, 305 games, right? So you think like, how good was it that we could send him out like that? And you feel a bit fortunate that you were able to experience that early on in your career, like 7-8 years in. We'd worked bloody hard for it. I've always said I'd prefer to have won a premiership late in my career than early. Jonathan Brown won his 3 at 18, 19 and 20 years of age, and then spent the next 15 years trying to.
Is it because it's hard coming off the high in a sense of like...
a little bit, yeah. Like just if you win one at a young age, you probably take it for granted a little bit.
Understood.
You know, you've won a flag and that, and it's great. But how much more would it mean to you if you won it at like 32 instead of 18, right? You've gone through all those years of hard work. That's how we felt with Crawf. And I was fortunate enough that it was probably smack bang in the middle of my career.
Yeah.
I'd done enough hard work to really appreciate it, but I still had an opportunity to continue to play for a few more years and try and achieve it again, which we didn't end up doing. And, you know, I left Hawthorn to go to another club. And when I made that decision, I knew that was going to be the end of winning a flag.
Right.
I wouldn't have made that decision if I hadn't won a flag at Hawthorn.
Understood.
You know what I mean? Because you'd be wrestling with that. So yeah, it was an unbelievable feeling, and you know, having played arguably what I would describe as my best ever game of football in the granny in terms of importance. I've played better games, more touches and kicked more goals and things like that. But I started in the forward pocket on Tom Harley. I dragged him up nice and high, and I got on the end of, I kicked a goal, and I set up a couple of goals and was in the mix.
Wow. And
then Trent Croad broke his foot halfway through the second quarter. So I had to go from playing forward. I had my head around playing forward and had the tail up, right, because I was going all right, to full back on Cam Mooney. I was giving up 6 inches because he's way taller than me, and had to completely. I was just now become a negating defender. I just had to bring the ball to ground, spoil, and I was petrified that he was going to be the guy that won on the game. That he kicked a couple of goals in the first quarter and looked by far their most damaging player. I'm thinking, shit, like 100,000 people at the G. I'm standing at full back. He said to all his teammates, "Get out. I want to isolate this little bloke, right?
No.
I want to isolate him." So I'm standing there. It's like the loneliest place on earth. We're behind. And first kick that comes in, this big pack, and I went to spoil and he marked it. I was standing on the mark like, this is my worst fear, you know. He went back and he hit the post, and then the rest is history, mate, right? He didn't kick a goal. So, yeah, like from a structural point of view, to have to get the call from the runner, mate, you're going to full back and, you know, took some intercept marks and spoils. I rate it as one of the best games of footy I've ever played.
Is that because it was just so hard to be multifaceted in such a big moment, and each moments was so critical to, that flag?
And Clarko would say to me, because he knew that I wanted to be a defender, and I was a defender leading up to that. Late in the year, he's like, "Mate, play your forward. Your flexibility, for the team could be really important come finals time." And he'd say it right, and you're like, "Oh yeah." Playing up forward in a forward line with Franklin Roughhead, Lewis, Rioli, Williams, and Osborne, I felt like the invisible man sometimes. You'd be in a good spot, and mate, of course they're kicking it to Buddy, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to get a kick, and it's a role that is thankless. You might work your ass off, and they'll kick the ball over your head, and your defender marks it, and you're like, "Oh, I've just run 8, right?" But true to his word, that flexibility became unbelievably evident in grand final to have to go back to full back and play a role, which I didn't think I would have to do. Trent Croad never played ever again. His foot blew up.
That's right.
And he
come back.
Stayed on the list for 2 more years, but he never got back to full fitness and retired. So it was a big moment.
One of the great grand final stories. Before we just go into a bit of an overview of the season, or even a bit of a preview for what's to go ahead, I just wanted to quickly touch on the GC Suns, and obviously you touched on you probably wouldn't have gone there if you hadn't have won a flag. Did you just purely go there based off you felt you had a couple more years left in you and you wanted to squeeze the most out of being a footy player, really? Yeah,
pretty much. The game had evolved a bit, and as I just mentioned, I like to be a defender. Clarko didn't see me as a defender anymore because what happened was they brought in the chopping of the arm rule. Me being a smaller guy on bigger opponents, that used to be one of my go-tos. You chop the arm right. So all of a sudden, that was a free. So that made life a bit harder for me. Then after the 2008 grand final, they brought in the deliberate rush behind rule, right? Which I think's been one of the best rules that they've brought in. But again, for a guy that plays on the last line who's not a great decision maker or kick, right? That used to be my, you look up and you shit yourself, you handball through for a point, right? Yeah. So they brought that in. They got a lot harder on the deliberate out-of-bounds rule. If you just kicked it up the line out of bounds, it was a free, right? So those 3 umpiring decisions probably hurt me a little bit in terms of being the defender. And so while I was playing as a defensive forward at Hawthorn, we had guys like Geray, Suckling, Bruce, Stratton, some really good players, kids that hadn't quite played AFL footy yet, but they were coming through, Whitecross. And the writing was on the wall a little bit. You know, Clarko's always brutally honest, and he said to me, mate, you're in our best 22 at the moment, but going forward, what that looks like, I can't guarantee you, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But I'm 27 years of age.
Right.
I'm thinking, shit, you know, if I knock back the Gold Coast and I stay here at Hawthorn, and I end up sort of getting dropped, getting retired at 28 years of age, thanks for your service, but you're done.
Yeah.
I had this opportunity to go to a new club. I was vice captain up there my first year behind Gary Ablett.
Okay.
They offered 3 years. So already that'd take me to 30.
Okay.
And they had a young developing list, needed some older guys.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have got another year or two. So really it's like I was looking at it as a 3, 4 or 5 year.
More as a tactical, strategic thing.
Than 18 months.
Yeah.
You know, But making that decision is hard, obviously, because I loved the Hawks. And when I made the decision, I knew that we were in premiership mode still. We'd won 08, but we hadn't had a great 9 or 10. But we weren't a million mile off.
Yeah.
I didn't think we'd go on and win 3 premierships post that, you know. But he had to rebuild that side again. And you know, that's one of his great efforts because I left, Xavier Ellis left, went to Perth. Clinton Young went to Collingwood. Yeah. All these guys left or got retired. And he built that three-peat again with Isaac Smith and Piopolo and all you know, Liam Shields and another group of guys, still the superstars, but that's why there's only 5 or 6 of them that played in all 4. You know, Buddy left. So there's a lot of guys that end up leaving. But yeah, that was the Gold Coast Suns. It was pretty tough up there. Like, it was probably, I knew that we wouldn't win many games and it'd be hard, but it was probably harder than I thought. And if you speak to any of the senior guys, the facilities were terrible.
Yeah.
They were training out of sheds.
Yeah.
And we were just getting beaten by like 15 goals a game. And, you know, it's not the young guys' faults, right, because they're just learning it. So a lot of the responsibility fell back on the senior guys. There was only like 4 or 5 of us.
Yeah.
Nathan Bock broke his leg, never played again. Gary Ablett was dominating week in, week out. He's a freak.
Yeah.
So when they were looking at the Suns and they're probably going like, oh, they got these players on big money, Brennan, Rishkatelli, Harbrow, Brown, they're not playing at the level that they should.
Yeah.
And that was a bit frustrating because like my level at Hawthorn was 10 to 15 disposals, not do too much kicking because they didn't want me to, spoil, compete, tackle, chase, smother, you know, be aggressive. I found I was doing that exact thing at the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
But because we were losing by 10, 15 goals, the media or the people sort of saying, oh, he's not playing well, or it's not good enough for one of their leaders.
Yeah.
And that's what I wrestled with a bit because what was considered a good game at Hawthorn, when you play that and you've played your role, you've won, that exact role wasn't good enough up there because we're getting pumped. Jeez. So it was we copped a fair bit of criticism up there, and the development program probably wasn't what it needed to be.
Yeah.
You know, Hawthorn had a great development program. They really put time and effort into the kids to get their skills right. And up there, they just gifted games to players that didn't deserve them, but thought they'd be better players at 30 games than they were at 10.
Yeah.
But only if you teach them the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
If you're not actually teaching them defensive running and the little things or dropping them for poor performance, they're just getting games
for the sake of it.
For the sake of it, under false pretenses.
Yeah.
I think that happened a little bit at the Gold Coast. Okay. There was some improvement naturally, but then to get them to the next level just wasn't there because the NEFL's not a very strong competition, and the players worked out pretty quick that they were getting games no matter what.
Yeah, it's not what you want. Mate, pretty incredible career you had. As I said, some of those stories around Hawthorn are folklore. I mean, they're going to be talked about for a long time, that squad. So before we do round out, Campbell, I did just want to get a few pointers of you off the current season we had. I know you do a lot of work behind the scenes and covering the footy with SEN and a couple of the other mainstream channels. But overall, what was your take on the season that we've had thus far, and obviously with the COVID in and out and bouncing around?
Yeah, they've done another terrific job, the AFL. I think the season's been fantastic. I mean, I think Port Adelaide are the team to beat at the moment, but the fact that we're sitting here and there's 6 genuine chances that can win the flag, I think for the AFL point of view is magnificent. That's what you want. And yeah, the COVID hit again, which made it a bit frustrating, and I'm sure the AFL would have liked their time again in terms of the fixture and a few little things like that. But the fact that they've been able to juggle another year, and it's been really exciting. I mean, look at the last round of the season.
Crazy.
How good those games were. Yeah. Maxi Gawn's goal after the siren, which then puts them on top of the ladder, which changes the dynamics of the footy finals, and it's brilliant. So yeah, I reckon they've done a good job. I think Port, I've said this the last month, they just have been building nicely. I used to think they were too one-dimensional. It was Charlie Dixon or bust. And just over the last 5 or 6 weeks, Georgiades didn't play on the weekend, but he bobbed up and he could kick some goals. Rosie, Pete Laddams, I think, will play a pretty important role in the next few weeks.
Yep.
Marshall. So all of a sudden, if Big Charlie doesn't kick his 3 or 4, but he just competes and brings the ball to ground, Orazio Fantasia, how good was he?
Yeah.
Now they look like a side that their backline's solid, their midfield's rock solid. Now they've just got enough options up forward that it's not Charlie Dixon or bust, and they're proving it.
So Port's your pick.
They're my
pick.
pick.
It's a pretty good top 6 too. Like it's not a major gap between at least a couple of them.
I'd be wrapped if Melbourne won it. Obviously, they haven't been in this position for a long time. So long since they've won a flag, and the long-suffering Demons supporters would love it. They're good. Geelong have been a bit disappointing, haven't they? But they get themselves in a really good position, and then they lose the first week of the finals. They do it all the time, but they've got the list that can win it.
Yeah.
At Brisbane, I think their best is good enough. They've got to do it the long way now, but GWS are smoky. They got to hope
they're a great smoky. If Toby Green, it's all good to play. Jeez, these.
Yeah, and the Doggies, well, they were probably premiership favourites up until a month ago.
Correct.
So yeah, been a great year.
Awesome, mate. Campbell Brown, I just want a big thank you for coming on the show. Absolute superstar of a bloke, a great storyteller, as everyone has listened on throughout. Get onto SEN Track Blokes if you want to listen to a good show, learn some stuff about horses and win some coin. But thanks again for coming on,
my
mate.
pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers.
Awesome.